Okay, hello everyone. Today I'm going to read through Communist Manifesto, hopefully study something, and without any more comments, let's jump into the thing. So the Communist Manifesto was created originally by Karl Marx and Frederick Engels in February of 1948. I now have the edition that is broadly distributed over the internet. Fortunately, I cannot say, transcribed by, no, that's the people of the past. Fortunately, I can't tell what exactly is this version. It has a lot of prefaces. But to my own preference, I would like to abstain from reading the prefaces before I read the whole thing. Just as I abstain from all the commentaries before I, well, read through the thing, right? So without further ado, let's go. So, Manifest of the Communist Party. A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter. Pope and Tsar, Metternich and Guizot, French radicals and German police spies. Where is the party in opposition that has not been decried as communistic by its opponents in power? Where is the opposition that has not hurled back the branding reproach of communism against the more advanced opposition parties, as well as against its reactionary adversaries? Two things result from this fact. First, communism is already acknowledged by all European powers to be itself a power. Second, it is high time that communists should openly, in the face of the whole world, publish their views, their aims, their tendencies, and meet their nursery tale of the specter of communism with a manifesto of the party itself. To this end, communists of various nationalities have assembled in London and sketched the following manifesto, to be published in the English, French, German, Italian, Flemish, and Danish languages. Okay. Spectre is haunting Europe. This is a very vivid phrase that is extremely popular, I think. Powerful stuff, I think. I'll add it to my notes. Those people who wrote this manifesto, they are not strangers to create some extreme allegories, judging by the first phrase. So, okay. Going next. Part 1. Bourgeois and Proletarians. The history of all hitherto existing society is a history of class struggles. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. Okay, the main idea here is, well, obviously, that the world is divided in oppressors and those who are oppressed, and their interactions are made either in open conflict or the hidden one. Okay, oppressors and oppressed is either open or hidden conflict. I'm writing here my own notes, which I will share. I try to restrain from the what's it called, premature commentaries about the contents. This is purely a scientific study, so uh, let's continue. In the earlier epochs of history, we find almost everywhere a complicated arrangement of society into various orders, a manifold gradation of social rank. In ancient Rome, we had patricians, knights, plebeians, slaves. In the Middle Age, feudal lords, vassals, guildmasters, journeymen, apprentices, serfs. In almost all of these classes, again, subordinate gradations. The modern bourgeois society that has sprouted from the ruins of feudal society has not done away with class antagonism. It has but established new classes, new conditions of oppression, new forms of struggle in place of the old ones. Our epochs, the epochs of the bourgeoisie, possesses, however, this distinct feature. It has simplified class antagonism. Society as a whole is more and more splitting up into two great hostile camps, into two great classes directly facing each other, bourgeoisie and proletariat. From the source of the Middle Ages sprang the chartered burghers of the earliest towns. From these burghers, the first elements of the bourgeoisie were developed. The discovery of America, the rounding of the Cape. What does that mean? Let's stop here. Do our proper research. Cape of Good Hope. So apparently, the Cape is, as the Wikipedia says, is a rocky headland on the Atlantic coast of the Cape Peninsula in South Africa. And jumping straight to the European exploration part of the article, in the early modern era, the first Europeans to reach the Cape was the Portuguese explorer Bartolomeu Dias on March the 12th of 1488, who named it the Cape of Storms. So I had to stop there, so there would be no things that are unknown, so we could be honest when, at least I can be honest when I tell that I know what I read. So yeah, the rounding of the Cape refers to this geographical exploration. So coming back to the manifesto, the discovery of America, the rounding of the Cape opened up fresh grounds for the rising bourgeoisie. The East Indian and Chinese markets, the colonization of America, trade with the colonies, the increase in the means of exchange and in commodities generally gave to commerce, to navigation, to industry an impulse never before known, and thereby to the revolutionary element in the tottering feudal society, a rapid development. Let's think about that again. So the idea here is that the creation of new markets, scratch that, the discovery of new markets for the European bourgeoisie gave an impulse to certain areas such as commerce, navigation, industry, and created a revolutionary element that is a rapid development. Oh yeah, if the markets are expanded, apparently the economics will thrive. All right. Moving next. Actually, I think this was a note. So, as authors imply, the society is split into two major groups: bourgeoisie. For the love of God, I would not be able to spell that word correctly. Okay, that have to do. And proletariat. And then they go into exploring the, let's call it, I don't know, some rapid development coming from feudal age. So that sounds like a completely separate thought. So let's say it formulated in such a way: market expansion okay. So market expansions allow it for a rapid development of a feudal society. For example, an impulse in navigation, industry, and commerce. Okay. Moving on. The feudal system of industry, in which industrial production has monopolized by closed guilds, now no longer sufficed for the growing wants of the new markets. The manufacturing systems took its place. The guild masters were pushed on one side by the manufacturing middle class. Division of labor between the different corporate guilds vanished in the face of division of labor in each single workshop. Let's think about that. The feudal system of industry, in which industrial production was monopolized by closed guilds, has no longer sufficed for the growing wants of the new markets. Why? The manufacturing system took its place. The guild masters were pushed on one side by the manufacturing middle class. Division of labor between the different corporate guilds vanished in the face of division of labor in each single workshop. I assume this has to do something with the fact that previously crafters had to work on the whole product, and at some point the products were either so complex in its technical nature or massive in its scale that it was no longer efficient to leave to one person to create the whole thing. Well, I can easily imagine that in terms of creating a car, right? So one person that knows exactly how to create every part of the car and assemble it together so it work and work well. those people would have to be extremely rare, very educated. And obviously, it's not a job for everyone. But divide the labor in each workshop or in which production line. So one person only has to know how to create one certain part or even part of a part. That sounds like, yeah, a more efficient way of organizing the labor. Okay. So I add to my notes that the labor had to be divided not by how to call it, not by the labor had to be divided not by the production, I would say, meaning that well, one person or one guild creates shoes and the other one creates uh, I don't know, cars. um, but the division would have to be even more precise, that one person creates a certain part of a shoe, the other creates another part, and the third one combines those parts together for the sake of efficiency. So the labor had to be divided not by production, but even within production line. To, for the sake of efficiency. Okay. Meantime, the markets kept ever growing, the demand ever rising. Even manufacturer no longer sufficed. Thereupon, steam and machinery revolutionized industrial production. The place of manufacture was taken by the giant modern industry, the place of the industrial middle class by industrial millionaires, the leaders of the whole industrial armies, the modern bourgeois. So this is like the historical facts, I guess. Okay. When the work of a single manufacturer were already became not enough itself, it was taken by machinery, and thus modern industry. Keep in mind that they are talking about modern by their time, so it's middle of 19th century. Modern industry was created. The place of the industrial middle class by industrial millionaires, the leaders of the whole industrial armies, the modern bourgeois. Okay, so this is just how it more or less organized in such times. Modern industry has established the world market, for which the discovery of America paved the way. This market has given an immense development to commerce, to navigation, to communication by land. This development has, in its turn, reacted on the extension of industry. And in proportion as industry, commerce, navigation, railways extended, in the same proportion the bourgeoisie developed, increased its capital, and pushed into the background every class handed down from the Middle Ages. So the main idea here is that with the discoveries that were discussed a bit earlier, as we already noted, market has expanded in a very rapid way, gave a lot of development to some of the areas, particularly in commerce, navigation, and communication by land. All right, that's reasonable. Thus, the proportion of crafting was very much increased, and the capital that amassed by some people turned them into bourgeoisie. I'm not sure if bourgeoisie was the new term by the time, because by now this is obviously very much not washed but used term. Let's stop here for a quick historical check, right? Okay, bourgeoisie is a sociologically defined social class equivalent in the middle to the middle or upper middle class. Well, obviously, it's a French term. It's distinguished from and traditionally contrasted with proletariat by their affluence, great cultural and financial capital. The bourgeoisie, in its original sense, is intimately linked to the existence of cities, recognized as such by the urban charters, municipal charters, town privileges, German town law. So there was no bourgeoisie apart from the citizenry of the cities. Rural peasants came under a different legal system. Etymology divided from the bourgeois of Old French, which means town dweller, which in turn was derived from Burg, market town, from the Old Frankish Burg as town. Okay, so it has pretty much complicated origins, but it all comes down to the living in town. So originally town dweller, and contemporarily these terms identify the ruling class in capitalist society as a social stratum. While bourgeois described in worldview of man describes the worldview of men and women whose way of thinking is socially and culturally determined by their economic materialism, and there's a lot of new words. Philistinism. Which in turn is Philistinism in the fields of philosophy and of aesthetics describes the attitudes, habits, and characteristics of a person who deprecates art and beauty, spirituality, and intellect. As a derogatory term, Philistine describes a person who is narrow-minded and hostile to the life of the mind, whose materialistic worldview and tastes indicate an indifference to cultural and aesthetic values. Okay, that's a lot of new stuff. Coming back to the term bourgeoisie, originally it meant town dweller and someone who possibly hangs around market town. And now, and I guess, judging by the contents of the Communist Manifesto, it has something to do with not only economic pragmatism and materialism, but also with neglect to some aesthetical fields, I guess. Well, let's stop that here. Okay, so finally coming back again to the Communist Manifesto, we have here this paragraph, which just described again that bourgeoisie as a class was developed during the time of the immense market expansion by the discoveries of America, East Indian and Chinese markets. And in time, this class developed, increased its capital, and every other class that was inherited from the Middle Ages was had been driven to the shadows, I guess. Okay. That deserves additional note. So, at the time of market expansion, the bourgeoisie amassed, let's not say that word, the bourgeoisie, increased their capital and became the most prominent class in society. Okay. We see, therefore, how the modern bourgeoisie is itself the product of a long course of development, of a series of revolutions in the modes of production and of exchange. Each step in the development of the bourgeoisie was accompanied by a corresponding political advance of that class. An oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility, an armed and self-governing association in the medieval commune, sorry, that came out wrong. An oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility, an armed and self-governed association in the medieval commune. Here, independent urban republic, as in Italy and Germany. There, taxable third estate of the monarchy, as in France. Afterwards, in the period of manufacturing proper, serving either the semi-feudal or the absolute monarchy as a counterpoise against the nobility. And in fact, cornerstone of the great monarchies in general, the bourgeoisie has at last, since the establishment of the modern industry and of the world market, conquered for itself, in the modern representative state, exclusive political sway. The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. That's a tough paragraph. So let's develop it a little bit. Each step in the development of the bourgeoisie was accompanied by the corresponding political advance of that class. So the more developed the bourgeoisie is, and I guess the development here refers to the amassing of the capital, it also went side by side with the political advances of this class, right? Let's make a note here. So with the development bourgeoisie advanced also politically. Okay. As oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility, an oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility, an armed and self-governing association in the medieval commune, and by the commune there is an asterisk, and the commentary says this was the name given their urban communities by the townsmen of Italy and France after they had purchased or conquered their initial rights of self-government from the feudal lords. Commune was a name taken in France by the nascent towns even before they had conquered from their feudal lords and masters local self-government and political rights as the third estate. Generally speaking, for the economical development of the bourgeoisie, England is here taken as a typical country. For its political development, England is taken as a typical country. For the in terms of discussing typical country in terms of economical development, so the typical country in terms of economical development is England. And in terms of discussion of the politics, the typical country of the political development was France. And all of this is commentaries by Engels. Okay, coming back to the phrase. So here we have a list of some communities, I guess. Oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility, an armed and self-governing association in the medieval commune, So this is this list represents some concrete examples, right? Here, independent urban republic, as in Italy and Germany. There, taxable third estate of the monarchy, as in France. Afterwards, in the period of manufacturing, proper serving either the semi-feudal or an absolute monarchy as a counterpoise against the nobility. That's a very tough paragraph. Let's first I have to check what the counterpoise means. A factor of force that balances or neutralizes another. I'm gonna have to look for the less less tasteful, maybe synonyms in thesaurus. So counterpoise means synonyms: balance, ballast, counteraction, compensation, equalization, equilibrium, offset, stabilization. Okay, so I got this. I got this. So this paragraph describes how the political advance went of the bourgeoisie. So this was initially an oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility, an armed and self-governing association in the medieval commune. So here it's independent urban republic, as in Italy and German. They're taxable third estate of the monarchy. And afterwards, in the period of the proper serving either the semi-feudal or the absolute monarchy as a counterpoint against the nobility. So the class became sort of like a balance for the stabilization against the nobility, working for the monarchs. And in fact, cornerstone of the great monarchies in general. As they mean like monarchs had to rely on bourgeoisie at some point. The bourgeoisie has at last, since the establishment of the modern industry and of the world market, conquered for itself in the modern representative state exclusive political sway. So this is like historical facts on how bourgeoisie became politically very much powerful. Okay. The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. So, executives of the modern state is nothing but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. So the modern state, as if the modern state works to help the bourgeoisie. I'm adding this to my notes. The state itself became an asset to help manage common affairs of bourgeoisie. Okay. The bourgeoisie historically has played a most revolutionary part. The bourgeoisie, wherever it has got the upper hand, has put an end to all feudal, patriarchal, idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound man to his natural superiors, and has left remaining no other nexus between man and the man than naked self-interest, than callous cash payment. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism, in the icy water of egotistical calculation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of numberless, indefeasible, chartered freedoms, has set up that single, unconscionable freedom, free trade. In one word, for exploitation wielded by religious and political illusions, it has substituted naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. Mhm. So, whenever bourgeoisie became a prominent power, it has put an end to certain forms of brutal exploitation, and some of the ways that people are communicating with each other, interacting, some things became things of the past, such as religious fervor was exchanged for egotistical calculations. And things that were previously unthinkable became reality because of that. So the free trade is an extremely free trade means an extremely free way of interaction between people. So I guess here Communist Manifesto gives its due to bourgeoisie for its work, right? So let's add it to the notes that bourgeoisie in turn replaced some of the ways people interacted with each other. Replaced it with let's not add such details, and created free trade, which is an unthinkable at the time freedom. The bourgeoisie has stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honored and looked up to with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into its paid wage laborers. Okay, so everybody starts working for bourgeoisie. All right. The bourgeoisie has turned away from the family its sentimental veil and has reduced the family relation into a mere money relation. Okay, well, now that they put it like that, that sounds quite evil. I guess they're referring to how some working families, especially at that time, well, most of the people there had to work. There was like obviously a man who worked for like 12, maybe 14, maybe sometimes maybe even 16 hours a day. The mother had to work in different fields, but also then the child also often had to work. The child labor was very much the thing at the time, and what it did, the people had to, well, they only like came to sleep together, I guess, and they had the like common budget, right? And in that particular view, the family became a money relation. Well, I guess that makes sense. I wouldn't object to that. I think it's at the time that was probably the case. The bourgeoisie has disclosed how it came to pass that the brutal display of vigor in the Middle Ages, which reactionaries so much admire, found its fitting complement in the most slothful indolence. Okay. I do not understand that word. Indolence. Avoidance of activity or exertion. Laziness. So they just like used 2 times in a row, they used the word sloth. The most slothful sloth. So the bourgeoisie has disclosed how it came to pass that the brutal display of vigor in the Middle Ages, which reactionaries so much admire, found its fitting complement in the most slothful indolence. I honestly do not understand what that means. So they like opened it up. How such thing could happen? That the display of vigor, fervorous display of vigor, that was prominent in the Middle Ages and is very much admired, found its complement in the most slothful indolence, laziness. Bourgeoisie opened it up. Well, I don't really see it. Maybe it's going to be complemented and commented later. It has been the first to show that what man's activity can bring about. It has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and Gothic cathedrals. It has conducted expeditions that put in the shade all former exoduses of nations and crusades. Okay, so yeah, bourgeoisie, very productive. It's very productive. The bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production, and thereby the relations of production, and with them the whole relations of society. Conservation of the old modes of production in an altered form was, on the contrary, the first condition of existence for all earlier industrial classes. Constant revolutionizing of production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty, and agitation distinguish the bourgeois from all earlier ones. So it's like ever-changing things. Never the moment to waste. All fixed, fast frozen relations with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices and opinions are swept away. All new formed ones became antiquated before they can ossify. All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy, sorry, I read it with the wrong intonation. All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy is profaned. And man is at last compelled to face with sober senses his real conditions of life and his relations with his kind. That's a tough paragraph as well. Let's do it one more time. The bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production, and thereby the relations of production, and with them the whole relations of society. Okay, so they bring change, and the change is so massive that it kind of affects everything in everywhere. All right, that's what I can understand. So the conservation of the old modes of production in an altered form was, on the contrary, a first condition of existence for all earlier industrial classes. So all earlier industrial classes, they relied on that what they knew before, it had to remain unchanged. Now it's not the case. The constant revolutionizing of production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty and agitation distinguish the bourgeois epoch from all earlier ones. That's a very interesting phrase. I think it doesn't have to be very much altered. I would add the whole citation to these notes of mine. All fixed, fast frozen relations, with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices and opinions, are swept away. All new formed ones became antiquated before they can ossify. I don't exactly know what ossify means. I have a guess. Become rigid or fixed in attitude or position. Cease developing. So yeah, it means that everything that was fixed and what cannot change become the thing of the past. Something that was relied upon, uh, well, it's like discarded, right? All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy is profaned. And man is at last compelled to face with sober senses his real conditions of life and his relations with his kind. That is a very interesting set of phrases. Honestly, when I started to read this, I had some set of expectations, and I thought this would be like more or less scientific read. So I wasn't expecting it to be that kind of it's kind of poetic. I would say it's kind of it reads like not like a scientific paper. It reads like a good literature with strong words, very interesting and unusual phrasing. It reads like something that has to grab your attention and agitate you. Well, I guess that's one of my first uh, one of my first opinions about this document is that it has a very, I guess it has large uh, value in terms of literature. That's very interesting. Those phrases you can study them, and even though they are complicated, a lot, very complicated, um, they really are interesting phrases. So sorry about that. I kind of let myself to be a bit mesmerized by the phrasing, but let's continue. But man, what a cool phrase. All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy is profaned. And man is at last compelled to face with sober senses his real conditions of life and his relations with his kind. Man, I love this phrase. This is incredible work of literature, I would say, just by this simple phrase. This is a, this is a tribute to harsh awakening. very harsh awakening. Nothing stands. What you revered earlier, it's all nothing. And a person has to sober up and really truly look at what his real life conditions are and what he or she is to the other poor bastards like him or her. That is an incredible phrase. I think what's wonderful about that is that not only it's not like it makes sense only in the context of this document, right? So nothing about communism was even said, and it has little to do with the bourgeoisie, right? It's just an observation on the brutal, harsh awakening of a person who is not living a very good life. That is interesting. That is very interesting. Okay, moving on. The need of a constantly expanding market for its products chases the bourgeoisie over the entire surface of the globe. It must nestle everywhere, settle everywhere, establish connections everywhere. It's very, very weird way of spelling connections with an X. I gotta check if it's has some another meaning. But no, Google can't say anything about that. So I guess maybe this is a typo. Maybe this is a word of the distant past. You know what? I think I have to add another note here. So the past two paragraphs means that the epoch of bourgeoisie brought with itself ever changing environment where nothing stays constant forever and no one let's not go. Well, I tend to sometimes fantasize and add things even though they were not told, so I have to pull myself back from that. So let's keep it this, where nothing stays constant forever. And authors imply, well, not imply, they directly say that at some point when nothing is holy anymore, man has to go through a rough awakening of what his real life conditions are and what he is to his kind. Okay, it's like that's like this notion of man discovering his place into society. That I guess this is. I can remember there were like several pictures of classical liter conflicts in literature divided in some epochs, and one of them certainly was the man trying to find his place into society, in the society. So this very much reflects that. Okay, the bourgeoisie has, through its exploitation of the world market, that's already sounds wrong. The bourgeoisie has, through its exploitation of the world market, given a cosmopolitan character to production and consumption in every country. To the great chagrin of reactionists, it has drawn from under the feet of industry the national ground on which it stood. And all old established national industries have been destroyed or are daily being destroyed. They are dislodged by the new industries whose introduction becomes a life and death question for all civilized nations. By industries that no longer work up indigenous raw material, but raw material drawn from the remotest zones. Industries whose products are consumed not only at home, but in every quarter of the globe. In place of the old wants satisfied by the production of the country, we find new wants required for their satisfaction the products of distant lands and climes. In place of the old local and national seclusion and self-sufficiency, we have intercourse in every direction, universal interdependence of nation. And in material, so also in intellectual production. And as in material, so also in intellectual production. The intellectual creation of individual nations become common property. National one-sidedness and narrow-mindedness become more and more impossible. And from the numerous national and local literatures, there arise a world literature. So the main point of this paragraph is that bourgeoisie, through establishment of the world market, gave to the production and consumption a cosmopolitan character, right? So it's stripped from the nationality, I guess. They imply that consumption and production becomes so universal, so it doesn't anymore belong to a certain nation that produced that. And it goes not only for material goods, but for intellectual property also. I'm not sure about any of that. I have to think about it because, well, we obviously. I have to make a note here that, of course, I do not know all the details of the life that took place in the middle of 19th century. So maybe that was the case, but something tells me that it doesn't have to be, because even now we, at least in terms of material goods, what does it mean? What does it mean for a material good to be cosmopolitan? It doesn't mean where it was produced. It's It's not unique to any nation. Well, I guess if you look at like in terms of modern franchises, it might be the way that way, because like it really doesn't very much matter where you get your McDonald's burger, right? Uh, in States, in France, in whatever other country, in Thailand, everywhere it's more or less the same. And if somewhere is an established factory that creates cars, if that says that this car is, let's call it like maybe, I don't know, let's call it like more or less cheap. Well, I don't want to. That's not really a good example. I cannot provide this, but in sense, yeah, it does make sense that if Apple has its factories all around, if Apple would have its factories all around the world, it doesn't really matter where you got your iPhone from, right? As long as it is labeled with the trademarks, correct trademarks, and every Q&A engineer approved that the process is correct, I guess the iPhone, even if it's produced either in States or maybe in I don't know, Germany, wherever, right? In terms of intellectual property, that does make sense, because you have to work for the global market, not for the local market you were in before. And in that sense, two things I see arise. The first one is that people become not like their local craftsmen. You don't have to settle for second, or maybe for like the best singer in your town. When you can listen for the best singer in the whole world, right? You don't have to settle for anything less than that, right? You can hear the recording or even watch the whole spectacle. And every content, even that made by the very small local creators, they tend to abide, let's call it the global rules. They abide some global laws, right? That it might not be, something might not be protected by the local laws, by the country you live in, but if you want to get some recognition, if you want to get some subscribers and whatnot, you have to like do all the necessary parts for the global market to take you in, right? And it even goes as far as in which language do you provide your content, right? Because, well, obviously, if you want to get the most, if you want to get in the most rich bucket, let's say, you have to make your content in a global language such as English, right? So I guess I understand that. The cosmopolitan character of production, consumption, and intellectual, and cosmopolitan character to production and consumption, both in material and intellectual production, right? That's interesting. So through, I wonder why they make it this document in that way. They describe They as if they describe. They make one. They made one paragraph to describe what bourgeoisie does, and then they are making some sort of description of what world has become with that, right? And it's every other paragraph talks about how the world has changed, and then they go back to what bourgeoisie is doing. So that's very interesting, but not very helpful when I try to create notes. But whatever. So through uh, uh, bourgeoisie's power, they changed the production and consumption in the whole world and added a cosmopolitan character to it, both to the material and intellectual property production. Yeah, whatever. In this context, it means the same thing. The bourgeoisie, by the rapid improvement of all instruments of production, by the immensely facilitated means of communication, draws all, even the most barbarian nations, into civilization. The cheap prices of commodities are the heavy artillery with which it batters down all Chinese walls, with which it forces the barbarians' intensely obstinate hatred of foreigners to capitulate. It compels all nations, on pain of extinction, to adopt the bourgeois mode of production. It compels them to introduce what it calls civilizations into their midst. An example, to become bourgeois themselves. In one word, it creates a world after its own image. Okay, so I'm gonna add it here that the bourgeoisie, by its efficiency, I feel like this whole document has to have some negative description of bourgeoisie, and as if I feel like I have to, in my notes, to stay accurate to the authors here, author's point of view, I have to describe it more or less in negative terms. Well, because we know that the Communist Manifesto takes bourgeoisie as the ultimate enemy of the world, I guess. But here, what I see is a description of incredible efficiency. The bourgeoisie, by its efficiency, compels all world to surrender itself and become more like the civilization from which bourgeoisie came from, right? Okay. Well, I guess this is a somewhat good place to stop, because this document has like an immense amount of text in it. This is very, how to say it? There's a lot of densely packed information in every paragraph, so I don't want to rush through it. And I guess we'll see you soon when I came back to that. At this note, well, I hope that we learn together something new about that. This is a very fascinating read, and it makes you. It has to make you like to gather all your focus to go through it and really understand. Even though we didn't touch, I guess, anything more or less complex yet, the way that it's written is kind of hard to read. But we'll get through it. We'll get through it and became smarter by it. So if you watched that, thank you and goodbye.